All right, good morning, folks. It is the Colorado Energy and Carbon Management Commission. This is our weekly agenda. It is Wednesday, October 11th, and we will do a roll call.
Good morning. Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Cross.
Present.
Commissioner McGowan.
Here.
Commissioner Meissner.
Here.
Commissioner Oath. Commissioner Ray. And Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, we have 5 of 7 commissioners present.
Great. Good morning, everybody. Good to see everyone. We will proceed through a fairly straightforward agenda. Next is commissioner comments. Does any commissioner have comments? Commissioner Meissner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to inform the other commissioners that we've held our second Colorado Produced Water Consortium meeting. The second meeting was an all-day meeting last Friday in person, which was great to get everyone in a room together. And the focus of the meeting primarily was strategic planning around how to structure the Produced Water Consortium and ultimately start to develop strategic results with the deliverables that were required of the consortium as per the legislation, amongst other things. But I thought it was a good meeting, a lot of participation from all the different participants. I think we had 31 different participants in the room. And so next meeting, we'll be meeting monthly for the first year. And so next meeting's the beginning of November. If anyone is interested in learning more about the Produced Water Consortium, they can look at the Produced Water Consortium webpage on the DNR website, where lots of information about the work that we're doing is available. So
Great work there, Commissioner Meissner. Appreciate it. Seeing no further comments, we move to consent agenda. Does anyone have questions with regard to consent? Seeing none, all those in favor of consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Chair, do we need a motion on that, or?
I think I just did make a motion. Do you want a second, Commissioner?
I will second. Yes, thanks.
All right, let's revote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 On the second revote under digital review, the motion carries with preponderance of the evidence. All right. We had agenda an update, but that is not happening. No problem there. So we now move to docket 230500142, an oil and gas development plan. This is Keir McGee, oil and gas onshore. And I believe we need to elevate Miss Wazelinkley or Miss Jost, I'm not sure whom, of the Jost Energy Law Firm. We also need to elevate someone from Weld County. I believe Mr. Maxey is not able to attend, but he has a substitute for us. So we'll look forward to doing that elevation as well.
Here we've elevated Kelly Holiday for Weld County.
Great. Ms. Holiday, if you want to visualize yourself, we look forward to hearing from you on docket 230500142.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about that. Having some technical difficulties Okay. Are you able to see me now?
Yes.
Okay. Morning, commissioners. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today about Weld County's WOGLA process regarding Keir McGee's Salazar Oil and Gas Development Plan. Weld County's Oil and Gas Energy Department held a pre-application meeting for the Salazar location on August the 31st of 2022, at which several alternative sites were discussed. Attendees at that pre-app meeting included Weld County staff, Keir McGee staff, a representative from the town of Firestone, the ECMC staff, and while CPW was unable to attend, they did express that they had no wildlife concerns at that time. While the location itself is outside of the high priority habitat, the access road falls within the high priority habitat for the mule deer severe winter range. Keir McGee proposed building a temporary access road outside of the high priority habitat to be utilized for drilling and completions operations during this sensitive season. and CPW was in agreement with this proposed solution. The 1041 WOGLA application was received on May the 4th of 2023. Weld County did not receive any public comments on this application and did not receive any request to participate in the hearing. The 1041 WOGLA hearing was held on August the 10th, 2023, and approved by the Weld County hearing officer. The final order was recorded with the Weld County Clerk and Recorder, and notice was published in the Greeley Tribune on August 23rd, 2023. 2A comments were submitted to the ECMC on August 31st of 2023 and have been included in the director's recommendation. Weld County agrees with the director's recommendation and supports approval of this permit. Thank you.
Thank you. We appreciate Weld County's presence here. Do commissioners have questions? Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and always appreciate Weld County participating in our process. I did have one question because I'm seeing some discrepancies between some of the one of the BMPs that's being proposed in our process and a BMP that I think is required as per your permit approval, and it has to do with sound walls. And so in your permit approval, it indicates that KMOG will implement the following BMPs, and one of those is install sound walls around the entire location. I'll ask the applicant to talk more about what the BMP is in our process, but I want to confirm from Weld County's perspective that is a requirement of your permit approval.
If that was part of the final order, then yes, it is required that they would install sound walls around the entirety of the permit, or excuse me, the location. I would have to look at the final order itself to see if that was indicated there, but it's usually also supported with our lighting plan and noise mitigation plan, that the indication of sound walls and where those sound walls are located, that they kind of correspond with those plans as well. So if there is a discrepancy and that does not align with the ECMC's permit, and KMG is committing to something different, I would say that they would need to come back and sundry their permit with us if they had any intentions of not having sound walls around the entirety of the location. You're muted.
I said thank you for that, and I think I saw it in the final order, and I'm looking at it now. But if you wanted to confirm that, and if I'm wrong, please let me know.
Okay, I will look to that final order, and if you can give me a minute to do that,
Yeah, absolutely.
I will confirm.
Okay, thank you. You're muted, Mr. Chair.
All these mutings. Thank you. Any further questions? All right, thank you very much. I think we now will elevate Ms. Wozlinski.
Thank you. Good morning. I believe we have all of our witnesses here. We're happy to be sworn in.
Let's have all the witnesses elevate themselves and visualize themselves.
Good morning to the panel. I'll just go one by one in the order that you appear on my screen, and I'll ask you to raise your right hand, state your name, and that you swear to tell the truth. I'll begin with Ms. Friedman.
Rachel Friedman, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Hess.
Yes, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Little.
Andy Lytle, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. And I promise I'll get your name right, pronunciation right eventually. Mr. Reimer.
Just Freemer, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Schlichtmeyer.
Chad Schlichtmeyer, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Woodward.
Bo Woodward, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Cray.
Carissa Cry, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Eichenberger.
Yeah, Eichenberger, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Coleman.
Julie Coleman, swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Honus.
Chris Honus, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Ms. Wiseman.
Lori Wiseman, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. I believe that should be everyone, but please let me know if I've missed a witness.
Ms. Mercer, I believe, and Kerr-McGee can correct me if I'm wrong, that Tom Crouch and Justin Nelson still need to be elevated.
Thank you. I'll give them a few minutes to be elevated.
And if needed, we can get started. And if they answer a question or speak today, we can always swear them in before they speak.
I'm looking to see if they've come on. Mr. Chair, would you like us to give the panel another couple minutes to come on board, or just swear them in if they're called upon later?
I think we just swear them in if they're called upon later.
Thank you.
And I see that Miss Holliday's raised her hand.
Yes, I looked back to the final order and Commissioner Messner is correct that it is ordered that there will be sound walls around the entire location. I did look back to the application itself, and there does seem to be a slight discrepancy that it appears on the southwest corner of the location. They, according to their noise plan, did not indicate the use of a sound wall, but I would say it would have to go by what is ordered under the final order, unless they would come back and amend that final order in front of our hearing officer.
Thank you very much. Okay, Ms. Wazelinski, you have the floor.
Wonderful, thank you. We will have a PowerPoint pulled up and then I will get started.
We are having technical difficulties sharing right now. Let me see if I can restart this and get it going. Sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman.
It's just telling me screen sharing is failing to start, so I might need to get off and then get back on.
Go ahead.
Thanks for your patience here. Hopefully just a couple more minutes. Ms. Coleman, I see you back on, so let's give this another try.
Try to get it up right now. I think it's going to work this time. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay, well, good morning, commissioners. My name is Kelsey Wazelinski with Jost Energy Law, and with Jamie Jost, we represent Kerr-McGee in the Salazar OGDP before you today in docket 2305-00142. I would like to thank Ms. Holliday for her comments today and Weld County for its participation through the WOGLA process and their support of this OGDP. And we would also like to thank ECMC staff and the director for their efforts on this OGDP. Next slide. The Salazar OGDP proposes one new oil and gas location, the Salazar 5-20HZ pad, to develop 12 new horizontal wells within one new proposed drilling and spacing unit, totaling 1,760 acres for the Niobrara, Fort Hays, Codell, Carlisle, and Sharon Springs formations. The Salazar pad is located in Weld County, and as Ms. Holliday mentioned, the WOGLA was approved on August 10th, 2023. The review of the Salazar pad falls under the siting condition provided under Rule 604B3, as there are 4 residential building units within 2,000 feet of the working pad surface for this proposed location. However, all wells, tanks, separation equipment, and compressors proposed on this oil and gas location will be more than 2,000 feet from the residential building units. In addition, 2 of the 4 residential building unit owners have signed informed consent. Kerr-McGee will walk through the 604B3 standards today in the presentation. This OGDP does not trigger any other Rule 304 ALA criteria, and specifically the location is not within any high priority habitat. As Kerr-McGee will explain today, a portion of the proposed access road is within the mule deer severe winter range, and Kerr-McGee has agreed to avoidance, minimization, and mitigation measures to offset any potential impacts. As part of the Salazar OGDP, Kerr-McGee has committed to plugging and reclaiming 37 wells within 1 year of all new wells turning on to production and decommissioning 8 facilities. Kerr-McGee will describe the associated emissions reductions in the presentation today. And finally, Kerr-McGee has complied with all notice requirements for the Salazar OGDP. No formal petitions were filed and no public comments were received on the Form 2A. And with that, I will turn it over to Rachel Friedman with Kerr-McGee to continue the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Wazzalinki. Good morning, Chair Robbins and Commissioners. My name is Rachel Friedman. I'm a geological advisor with Kerr McGee. It's my pleasure to review our proposed Salazar OGDP with you today. In the presentation, I'll cover a variety of topics, including best management practices, siting considerations, air monitoring, and community outreach. Next slide, please. As you know, Kerr McGee is a subsidiary of Oxy USA Inc. and one of the largest producers of oil and natural gas in the DJ Basin. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have about our company. Next slide, please. Kerr McGee is proud to implement industry-leading BMPs with our development, including using our Integrated Operations Center to provide remote monitoring capabilities 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Our water on demand system uses underground pipelines to bring water to the location for completions. At the Salazar location, this will eliminate approximately 100,000 truck trips. Our oil tankless facility design eliminates the largest source of emissions and removes 36,527 truck trips from the Salazar location. According to state emissions inventory reports, Oxy has the lowest greenhouse gas intensity of any operator in Colorado. Next slide, please. The Salazar location is proposed in the southwest quarter of the northwest quarter of Section 20, Township 3 North, Range 367. We plan on using 12 horizontal wells to develop 1,760 acres. Kerr McGee received an approved 1041 WOGLA permit on August 10th, 2023. There are 4 residential building units within 2,000 feet of the working pad surface. The closest RBU is 1,788 feet to the east. Highlighted in yellow on the map, you can see that 2 of the 4 RBUs have signed informed consent. This location is outside of all other Rule 304 B2B ALA criteria, including high priority habitat and designated outdoor activity areas. There are no schools or childcare centers nearby, and it is not within a floodplain nor immediately upgradient from wetlands or riparian areas. Kerr McGee has worked hard to ensure that this pad meets the criteria for Rule 604B3, which states that all wells, tanks, separation equipment, or compressors are located more than 2,000 feet from all RBUs. Next slide, please. This slide shows an overview of our permitting timeline. No comments were received during the 30-day comment period, and no petitions were filed prior to the OGDP deadline. Kerr McGee has also received a director's recommendation for approval of this OGDP. Next slide, please. The review of the Salazar OGDP is under Rule 604B3, which provides an exception to the 2,000-foot siting requirement by siting all wells, tanks, separation equipment, or compressors proposed on the oil and gas location more than 2,000 feet from all residential building units or high occupancy building units. The statement of basis and purpose explains that the equipment listed in Rule 604B3 are the main on-site equipment through which produced hydrocarbons flow, and the Commission recognizes that they are the primary sources of air pollutant emissions, noise, or other conditions that may cause adverse impacts to public health and welfare due to proximity. By siting this equipment more than 2,000 feet from all RBUs, the Salazar location provides similar protections for public health and welfare as an oil and gas location with a working pad surface 2,000 feet from all residential building units. Next slide, please. To comply with Rule 604B3, Kerr McGee intends to place the LACT unit 2,001 feet away from the nearest RBU, and the closest separation equipment, the bulk separator, 2,036 feet away from the same RBU. That RBU that is affected by this equipment has signed informed consent. The closest wellhead is 2,002 feet away from an RBU to the east. As noted in the COA in the director's recommendation, Kerr McGee agrees to file a Form 4 that shows the as-built survey to confirm compliance with Rule 604B3. Next slide, please. Kerr-McGee considered 4 locations when planning the Salazar location, shown by the circles. This slide shows how limited locations outside of ALA triggers are near the development area. The density of RBUs is shown by the pink shaded areas that represent the 2,000-foot buffer around those RBUs. Other ALA criteria shown on the map include high priority habitat, floodplain, and wetlands. Next slide. I'd like to walk you through the details of each of the 3 alternative locations we considered. Kerr-McGee discussed location 2 at length with the surface owner. To place the pad at the surface owner's desired location, 3 residential building units would be within 2,000 feet of the working pad surface. Additionally, the surface owner has an agricultural federal lease on this property that prevents oil and gas development. Alternative location 3 in section 17 was also considered. This location would have 1 RBU within 2,000 feet and is in agricultural land, and Kerr-McGee would be challenged to drill the entire DSU from this location. Ultimately, Kerr-McGee was unable to secure a surface location for location 3. We also considered location 4. Kerr-McGee was unable to reach the surface owners at this location to discuss a surface use agreement. Additionally, this location is near the Longmont Fault, creating potential operational concerns, including hole stability issues, lost circulation, and well control complications. Placing the heels of wellbores in a large-scale fault introduces significant geologic complexities, including steering challenges. Even without the risk of difficulties introduced by the Longmont Fault, Kerr-McGee would be challenged to fully develop the 1,760 acres from this location. At the preferred location, we are able to place all tanks, separation equipment, and compressors more than 2,000 feet from all RBUs. We have received informed consent from 50% of the RBUs within 2,000 feet, and we are able to minimize impacts to wildlife at this location by using a temporary access road. Our analysis of the available locations in the area shows that the preferred Salazar location is the most protective that allows development of the full 1,760 acres. Next slide, please. The working pad surface for the location is outside of floodplain and high priority habitat. The permanent access road will disturb approximately 1 acre of mule deer severe winter range habitat. Kerr-McGee consulted with CPW regarding this disturbance. To avoid impacts to mule deer severe winter range, a temporary access road will be used during pre-production phases and later reclaimed. Unfortunately, this road cannot be used for the life of the facility, as it would permanently remove 5.5 acres of cropland from the surface owner's crops. The permanent access road will be constructed outside of stipulations associated with mule deer severe winter range, and Kerr-McGee will pay direct impacts of $13,750. Next slide, please. Currently, Kerr-McGee plans to begin pad construction on this location in the first quarter of 2024 and begin the interim reclamation phase in the first quarter of 2025. The pad will be 14.71 acres during construction and will be reduced to 4.2 acres at interim reclamation. Next slide, please. Kerr-McGee commits to plug and abandon the 37 wells highlighted on the map to the right within 1 year of turning the Salazar wells over to production. We will decommission 8 facilities, which will remove 8 produced water tanks, 12 oil tanks, and reclaim 11.1 acres of existing facility footprints. The removal of these locations will eliminate 288 annual truck trips in the area and reduce the emissions shown in the chart on the left. After interim reclamation, Kerr-McGee will have reclaimed 4.2 more acres than the project has disturbed. Next slide, please. Kerr-McGee will avoid, minimize, and mitigate impacts to receptors by implementing best-in-class BMPs, including using Group 3 drilling mud to reduce odors and emissions, and eliminating oil storage on site. Next slide. Mitigating measures include speed restrictions and neutral colored facilities. Kerr-McGee will use air-actuated pneumatic devices and electric-powered production equipment to reduce emissions. We will also use sound walls to limit light and noise trespass. Next slide, please. We will reduce emissions by using a closed-loop system and temporary ECDs on water storage tanks that are equipped with combustion devices with a 98% destruction efficiency. Our goal is to use highline power for our drilling rig, but at a minimum, we will commit to supply rig power by natural gas engines with a battery energy storage system. Audio, visual, and olfactory inspections will be conducted weekly for the first year, and the location will be inspected for gas leaks monthly using an infrared camera. Next slide, please. Emissions will also be reduced by using Tier 4 equivalent or better engines during completions. Our oil tankless facility design removes 36,527 truck trips. Additionally, Kerr-McGee's use of a closed-loop system and 24-hour monitoring provided by the IOC remove emissions as well. Next slide. At the Salazar location, we will place 1,580 feet of 32-foot tall acoustical sound walls on all sides of the pad. Our modeling indicates that as a result of sound wall placement, nearby receptors should not experience any major changes in noise or lighting. Next slide, please. All traffic will exit the location north onto Weld County Road 32 and follow the approved haul route. As mentioned, the temporary access road will minimize impacts to wildlife. Next slide. Kerr-McGee appreciates the opportunity to consult with CDPHE. We held 2 consultations, one in April and one in August of 2023. We have committed to 44 BMPs related to air, water, waste, and PFAS. On high ozone days, Kerr-McGee commits to reduce truck and worker traffic and reschedule non-essential operational activities such as pigging, well unloading, and tank cleaning. Next slide, please. Since 2020, Kerr-McGee has used its field-wide air monitoring program to perform air monitoring at 19 different production drilling sites, 27 different completion sites, and 15 different production facility sites, giving us thousands of data points to evaluate any potential impacts from our operations. The resulting data includes 7,500 air samples spanning all phases of oil and gas development. All results are well below the CDPHE health guidance value of 9 parts per billion for benzene, as shown on the graphs below. Next slide, please. The air monitoring program includes continuous VOC analyzers and continuous benzene monitoring. Kerr-McGee's IOC oversees the air monitoring program, providing immediate investigation response. At the end of each month, we provide a summary of the data collected to CDPHE, ECMC, Weld County, and post the information to the Oxy stakeholder website. The site-specific air monitoring plan for Salazar was approved by CDPHE on September 1st, 2023. Air monitoring will be conducted during drilling and completions operations and the first 6 months of production. The map on the right shows the proposed air monitoring locations around the Salazar location and their position relative to the nearest RBU. Next slide, please. We reached out to our neighbors to tell them about this project and get their feedback. As part of our engagement, Kerr-McGee has provided all required notices, including 148 completeness packets. We have been in direct contact with 100% of the RBUs within 2,000 feet of the working pad surface and have engaged with the stakeholder to the northwest whose home is just outside of the 2,000-foot buffer. 50% of the RBUs within 2,000 feet of the working pad surface have signed informed consent. We have posted our response line number and email address facing County Road 17, so interested community members can contact us. Next slide, please. Initial outreach efforts started early this year, and we continue to engage with the community as recently as this month, notably 2 door-to-door visits, one in April and one in September. Next slide, please. Here's some more detail on our conversations with each RBU, including the one just outside of 2,000 feet. The overarching interest was around traffic. The stakeholders were pleased to see the permanent haul route and traffic impact mitigations. Next slide. All development project updates will be posted on our website in addition to the monthly air monitoring summaries. We continue to proactively communicate with the stakeholders for the life of the project through the final reclamation of the wells. Next slide. In conclusion, the Salazar OGDP provides protections for public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. We are able to site equipment, tanks, separation equipment, and compressors in accordance with Rule 604(b)(3). No petitions were filed to the OGDP. No public comments were received. The Weld County 1041 WOGLA was approved in August of 2023. The best management practices outlined here allow us to avoid, minimize, and mitigate temporary impacts to the community and the environment. We are able to minimize cumulative impacts by removing 37 wells and 8 facilities, resulting in 4.2 more acres of reclamation than the Salazar OGDP will ultimately disturb. I will now hand the presentation back to Ms. Wazelinski and look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you, Ms. Friedman. This last slide just shows the relief requested for the Salazar OGDP. This does conclude our presentation. As you can see, Kerr-McGee has a number of subject matter experts on the hearing today. So I'll have everyone please turn their cameras on. And I will note that we do have Mr. Tom Crouch and Mr. Justin Nelson on the panel now, and they are available to be sworn in.
Why don't we go ahead and swear them in first before we open the panel for questions?
So I'll go one by one and ask you to raise your right hand, state your first and last name, and that you swear to tell the truth. Mr. Nelson?
Justin Nelson, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you. Mr. Crouch?
Tom Crouch, I swear to tell the truth.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate the presentation. Appreciate the folks being on the panel. We will now turn to questions from commissioners. And commissioners, there's like 24 people on the screen. So if you want to ask a question, raise a hand so that I can see you. Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for the application and the presentation. Lots of information, and I just have a few points of clarification because there seems to be some discrepancy between some of the stuff, some of the BMPs that are associated on the BMP or on the 2A, and some of the commitments in your presentation. And I just want to make sure that the BMPs that are placed in the 2A are accurate, clean, and that there's no inaccuracies. So first one I'll ask, because in the presentation you indicated that you would utilize a sound wall all the way around the facility. In 2 different places in the 2A, it indicates that it's going to be a partial sound wall. And so I just need to confirm one way or another so we can make the 2A accurate, whether it's going to be a full sound wall around the entire perimeter or whether this is a partial sound wall.
Yeah, Julie, would you mind to pull up? We've got a layout to show you that shows what we've proposed in both the Weld County and the 2A submitted to the ECMC. So the green highlighted, that those are the sound walls. And so we do intend to place sound walls on each side of the location. But we do not have a full sound wall on the south side of the location. And we have Justin Nelson would be happy to speak to that if you have any further questions.
So I don't have any further questions because to me, this is a partial sound wall. I mean, understanding it goes all the way around, and so I don't have a problem with it. And so I think our BMP probably captures this. And you can argue with Weld County as whether or not it captures their BMP associated with their permit. So I'm comfortable with this. So second question is around the ozone mitigation days and whether or not, I mean, a lot of those say as feasible. And so, I want to understand whether you're suggesting that it should be as feasible in those or whether you're committing to those. And if we're going to keep the as feasible language in there, I'm also going to recommend that we take those out as BMPs because it's an unenforceable BMP.
Carissa, would you mind to speak to this?
Yeah, I can speak to the as feasible language. The as feasible language is meant to cover things like delayed fueling, for example. It says as feasible because if you have multiple ozone days in a row, as we know we have sometimes here, we can't delay fueling of all of our vehicles for multiple days in a row. So that's just one example. That as feasible is meant to capture things like that, not that we won't do the activity.
No, I understand that, but and I understand that this is a nuanced thing, but in my opinion, at least, you can't put an unenforceable BMP, in a permit. And so as feasible to me is unenforceable. And so I think it either goes in there or it doesn't go in there. I'm not sure that if it's not in there, it makes or breaks this particular application. But I as one commissioner, am not interested in seeing as feasible or as necessary or as needed language in any BMPs, just because I think ultimately that becomes an unenforceable BMP. It's a good idea, and I appreciate the idea that you're going to do it as you can, right? But I don't think it is appropriate as a BMP.
Further questions, Commissioner Messner?
Before we move on from that, I'm sorry, I just wanted to comment that we did hold our consultation with CDPHE and Ms. Sorensen agreed to the as feasible language and encouraged us to include those BMPs on our 2A.
Okay, well, then let's actually bring Ms. Sorensen up because I had a conversation with Ms. Sorensen that I think was different than that, so.
All right, while we are looking to potentially elevate Ms. Sorensen, do other commissioners have questions? Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While we're doing that, I just a couple of quick questions. I noted a 2-month delay between the surface casing and the drilling and a 3-month pause between drilling and completions. We've talked before about encouraging consistent and expeditious development throughout the development phase. Can you talk a little bit more about why the pauses, and are they part of the development itself, or is it part of an overall larger plan of moving equipment around? And is there a way to move directly from one phase into another?
I can speak to it generally, and then I'm not sure who else can speak to it a little bit more in detail. I believe that the way we have things right now, it is kind of a continuous development. There may be some minor breaks, but the dates that were listed on the slide that showed, those are just the starting dates. And so the drilling, I think, takes a couple of months. And so there should just be a very small break.
Thank you, Ms. Friedman. I appreciate the clarification. And one other question quickly while I'm going, Mr. Chair, if I may, can you discuss the highline power parameters and progress? I very much appreciate the backup approach as well and wanted to make that clear, but wanted to see if you could add a little more detail as to whether the highline power approach is going to be ultimately feasible.
Chris, would you like to take that?
Yeah, I can jump in there. Chris Honus, I'm the drilling manager. We basically reach out to the third-party utility companies, and we have to do an engineering analysis with them where we try to figure out if the grid can handle highline power or not. Our program throughout most of next year and into 2025, we're going to have a large portion of our wells that do end up on highline power. But getting that engineering study back and then having the utility confirm that they deliver for us in time is always a little bit up in the air. And so we promise to run natural gas generators with a battery, which is kind of the next best choice. And then in the background, we're trying to work with that utility to run highline power, which is our preferred method when it can fall into place. And so this one, we don't quite have that answer back yet from the utility company on whether the grid can handle it. But our goal would be to use highline power if they come back to us and say it's available.
Thank you, Mr. Honas. So what I heard there was that you are along in the process of discussing this particular project with the utility and are not, intending to later make your first pitch. Is that correct?
Right, exactly.
Thanks for the clarification. Appreciate that. That's all for me. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
You're on mute, Mr. Chair.
All right. I know Commissioner McGowan has a question, but before we go there, let's get back to Tessa Sorensen. Commissioner Messner, would you like to re-ask your question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Sorensen, appreciate you being here. There was some indication by the operator that you had suggested or you were okay with the as feasible language associated with the BMPs here. And I wonder if you could just elaborate on whether or not as feasible is is something that you're comfortable with, or whether it's an appropriate BMP.
Sure. So we consulted with the operator on August 9th of this year. And so the way a lot of those work is we actually end up sending a kind of standard baseline set of BMPs to the operator for them to answer whether they are willing to commit to those or not. And then we have a discussion about those during those consultation meetings. The default language for all of the ozone days BMPs, of which there are actually 7, eight, does not include the language as feasible. That is, the standard does not actually have that. A committal like that does require a request to do a partial committal. That partial committal is fairly common. I will note that the operator did commit to 2 of the ozone BMPs without modifying the language, and then did not we actually marked one of them as not applicable, and then the other 5 actually did have the as feasible language as a modified committal, and that was noted in my notes from that consultation. So it was at operator request that we put that in there. If the commission or the operator is not comfortable with that, it's certainly something we can not necessarily allow in the future, but it was requested by the operator in this case.
Thanks for that. That's super helpful. And I think as I understanding that as I get to deliberations, I think once again, at least from this commissioner's opinion, the as feasible language does not make an enforceable BMP, and so I don't think is appropriate to put in a 2A. And so I would request to removing those that have not actually been committed to. And again, I understand the intent. I understand that there's certainly a willingness to try, but I don't see that as an enforceable BMP in an application.
I do want to note that for all the commissioners and Mr. Chair and the operator on the line here, we have actually had other operators commit to those BMPs without the as feasible language recently.
Good information. Thank you.
Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And hold on, I'm going to find my note. This is something I always ask for. I'm wondering if we can put the emissions reductions estimates from removing the 38 wells and the 8 facilities. So there are potential emissions, I think, from water tanks, oil tanks, and the wells. Can we put those in the Form 2B?
Yes.
Further questions from commissioners? Okay, I'm seeing no further questions. With that, would thank the panel and ask the panel to unvisualize themselves, if that's a word, and that will allow me to bring this to deliberations amongst commissioners at this point in time. Commissioner
Mr. Chair, I apologize. There was one other thing, and this is a typo. but I think it's an important typo to highlight. And so, Ms. Wozlinski, I'm going to ask your opinion on this, but on page 19 of the Form 2A, on section 6, which is headed wildlife, in there, it indicates that production facilities are designed to truck oil, eliminating storage tanks and truck trips. I know that that's a typo because I know it was supposed to say to pipe oil. And so I wonder if that could be amended. And I wonder if the applicant would be okay with that.
Yes, I'll confirm with Ms. Friedman that that's acceptable.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank
of
you.
course.
Thank you.
Thank you for noting that.
You're muted.
With that, I think I can start deliberations if my fellow commissioners are okay with that. I appreciate what has been presented today. I think that as indicated in that last slide, for all those reasons, this is an approvable BMP. And I want to talk a little bit about Commissioner Messner, your uncomfortness with the words "as feasible." And I know where you're coming from in terms of being a former county commissioner. And when you have that kind of language, the quote, good idea can evaporate. But I think it is a good idea. And I also think that, at least from my perspective, when we have a applicant that is committing to do something where it's feasible, that is more than just not having it in a BMP. It becomes an interpretation as to whether something is feasible or not with our staff as they go about doing the activities online. Like, for instance, the idea of multi-days of refueling and then needing to actually refuel. I think there's a better, and again, I would appreciate not having feasible language, but in an instance in which an applicant believes that is necessary, I think we're getting more bang for the buck if we have that, including the as feasible, than just removing it entirely. And that's, you and I can have different interpretations of that. And that's why we've got 5 members of a commission, and that's why we deliberate, et cetera. But I just wanted the record to reflect this commissioner's perspective that it's better to have it, even if it's caveated with some feasibility language, because that's a better commitment than not having it at all. So that's my position on that front. Wanted to make sure that the record understood that. I would be in favor of approving the OGDP, including with this language as indicated. Commissioner Messner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I think a couple of things. I mean, I will agree with you on the approvability of this application. I really appreciate the 37 wells that are going to be plugged and abandoned, the facilities that are going to be retired, the net decrease in emissions and acreage associated with this application. I mean, I think this makes it a strong application. I think the utilization of electricity for production facility, natural gas, powered drill rig with battery backup, group 3 drilling muds, everything piped except for produced water, which at some point I would love to see produced water piped in these applications. And I think will continue to be a conversation of the produced water consortium. However, you know, proximity to homes, being creative with a temporary access road. I mean, there's lots of good things about this application, and lots of good things about this operator and the different approaches that they take to applications. So my opinion on, you know, whether as feasible is appropriate in you know, an order or an application that we are going to be required to enforce or not is you know, is just that. To me, it's a structured thing. So, I mean, it's great. I mean, an applicant can say in an application all day long that they're planning on doing this stuff and they think it's a good idea, and, you know, certainly are trying their best to do that thing. And I think it's good. And I do actually believe that this operator will actually do that. but I don't think that there's a place in there in a regulatory scheme for language like as feasible. And so if they want to come up, and I think Ms. Sorensen's indication that a number of operators are actually committing to these BMPs without the utilization of the word as feasible is telling that it's possible for an operator to do that, should they choose to. And if they choose to do it, as feasible, that's fine too. In a lot of situations, it may or not make or break the application, but I don't think it has an appropriate place inside of, unless you want to create a separate category from a BMP, for good ideas in an application, and that can be included, in our recorded order. But I think the things that are included in 2As, and I'm basing this on an opinion that we previously had from the AAG, that as feasible language, as necessary language, is not appropriate for a BMP. So I stand on that one from this commissioner's opinion.
I see our AAG has elevated herself. Would love to hear from AAG Mercer.
Thank you, commissioners. So in my view, the as feasible language definitely could complicate enforcement of a BMP. I think it puts staff in a position, if we'll use the example of postponing vehicle refueling, because that was used. If staff feels that, the operator is refueling on high ozone days in a way that is unnecessary, and they think staff believes it is feasible to delay as promised in the BMP, I do believe that's enforceable. So I want to make sure that I know we've had different conversations around this in the past. I want to make sure my previous advice is understood. I'm not of the opinion that including as feasible in a BMP renders it unenforceable. I think a BMP on a final permit is enforceable. Then you just have to look to the terms of it, and staff would have to look to the terms in trying to enforce that BMP. And so certainly it would, if there were an enforcement action involving one of these BMPs, including the feasibility language, that does complicate staff's burden of showing that the BMP was violated. But that does not render the BMP unenforceable or superfluous, in my opinion. Please let me know if that makes sense, or if commissioners have further questions for me.
Further questions on that point before we move forward, Commissioner Messner?
Thank you, AAG Mercer. I guess where I struggle with it is that, what precludes an operator from putting as feasible, on any BMP that they're proposing, right? We'll protect wildlife, as feasible. We'll deal with these timing steps as feasible. And so this is where I struggle with it, in a regulatory scheme. You know what I mean? Because it can certainly be interpreted, but I mean, why go through that brain damage when it's unnecessary? I mean, I can't think of any other land use regulation or condition of approval in land use processes that would allow the word as feasible to be utilized.
Thanks for that question. And I think, to the point of what would stop that from being included in any BMP, I think that comes down to the commission's determination of whether including the feasibility caveat, if we will, in a BMP interferes with the application being able to meet the standards set by the Act and the rules of does this application avoid, minimize, and mitigate adverse impacts. So if the commission feels that including, as feasible threatens the ability of that application to comply with the standards, then that would not be an acceptable BMP. But if the commission feels that the application adequately, meets the legal standards, even with feasibility in there, then it would be a legally defensible BMP, in my view. But I certainly understand where you're coming from and believe it's ultimately a decision for you all as the commission.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since we're talking about this point, I just wanted to say I appreciate it being raised, and I think it is an important conversation for us to have. And I appreciate AAG Mercer's point in that if we're talking about whether that BMP, pushes it above a standard or below a standard, I do think it's elevated in importance in that instance. I look at this from a kind of a good, better, best perspective. Best being we will do X, period. And better being much as Kerr-McGee has done on the Highline Power here, which is said we intend to use Highline Power, but if not, this is the standard that we're backing down to. To me, that's a good alternative to just saying as feasible, being able to back it down to just a little smaller standard. And then I would also agree, Mr. Chair, with you that when we're talking about BMPs that are above and beyond what our regulations require, I can live with the as feasible language and do think that it's an upgrade to no statement at all. Certainly, I prefer best, and if can't get best, I like a back down alternative, but am open to the use of as feasible when we're talking about standards that are above and beyond our regulatory standards.
You're muted still, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, Commissioner Cross. Sorry, I have a new muting method, and so I'm not doing very well with it. Apologies.
No worries, and thank you. I'll be quick with this. I agree with the chair and Commissioner Ackerman. I do believe that I'm okay with the if feasible language. I think to Commissioner Messner's point, I think that if we were to see an applicant put when feasible, if feasible on every BMP, that would create some serious concerns. And I don't think that that's something that we're seeing here. I think it's with a limited set of issues that they've explained the feasibility. And I just note that especially for something of this nature, I'm going to defer to CDPHE and what they've put in their BMP list, and how they want to look at including or not including the feasibility language. And so I'm going to defer to them on that issue. With respect to the application at hand, I think that this is an approvable application. Again, just kind of looking at the numbers, 37 wells, 8 facilities, you're talking about tens of thousands of truck trips being eliminated during post-production. You're looking at truck trips being eliminated to the existing facilities. You're looking at I think they said 100,000 water truck trips being eliminated. These are all great things, especially as we get ready for the cumulative impacts discussion the next couple of days that we'll be having. I think it's important to highlight these kind of efforts to lower emissions, have a net benefit from what we're seeing with respect to emissions overall when we get these applications. So I am in favor of approving this application.
Further discussion, Commissioner Messner?
Thanks, and I appreciate everyone's thoughts on this. I mean, I just one last point that I'll make is, to Commissioner Ackerman and Chair Robbins, your points, and AAG Mercer's point. Essentially, what I'm hearing is that an application needs to get reviewed without consideration of the as feasible BMPs, and assuming that application is approvable without those BMPs, then it would be appropriate to utilize the term as feasible and include those BMPs. But in a situation where a BMP would be would be important to ensure that the application is approvable, if it utilizes the term as feasible, then it would be inappropriate. Is that my understanding of your?
That's not my. I'm not that black and white, Commissioner Messner. I think that there can be times where the inclusion of something, including a feasibility analysis based upon operational constraints, is approvable. you know, and you and I could have a heartfelt, legit difference on that point. And if you want to approach it that as feasible means that it's not approvable, fine. I'm not in that camp. I think that there's value add, even if it's on an as feasible, because I think that the operator, based upon operational constraints, our staff, based upon enforcement constraints, will be able to make sure that it happens, you know, as much as it can, right? So, but that's just me. And, you know, again, we may have a legitimate and positive and understandable difference of opinion on that point.
Okay. Well, for this application, I'm gonna vote in approval of it because I believe the application is approvable without the inclusion of the as feasible BMPs.
Very good. Further discussion, Commissioner Ackerman?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a couple of points. I won't restate any positive points that have been made so far by other commissioners, but I just wanted to state that this is a very good application. I once again want to recognize the continued strength of applications from Occidental and its subsidiaries. I think this is a very strong application for the points that have been pointed out. But I also wanted to note and specifically point out the commitment to pursue to the best of their ability highline power and the recognition that the backup of natural gas with battery storage is a very, very strong backup to highline power. This is included as just another positive point in the application, but this is significant progress toward improving emissions as they relate to oil and gas operations, and a significant step that's being taken by this operator leading the way, and wanted to make sure that we recognize that. I am strongly in support of this application.
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman. If we have no further deliberation, does someone want to make a motion?
I'll move to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Ackerman.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, and we have a visualized AAG.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to see whether that motion included the BMP suggested or the amendment suggested by Commissioner McGowan to update the Form 2B to include emissions reductions estimates for plugging and abandoning wells and facilities, as well as the condition of approval from the director's recommendation requiring an as-built survey.
Thanks for the reminder, AAG Mercer. Sorry to jump in, Mr. Chair.
No, go ahead.
Thanks for the reminder, AAG Mercer. And yes, I would amend the motion to include both of those. Although, Mr. Chair, did we hear any concerns from the operator associated with Commissioner McGowan's suggestion?
I think they were in agreement. Ms. Wozlinski?
Thank you. Yes, we are in agreement.
Commissioner Cross?
I'll second that as well.
Motion is so amended.
Very good. We have an amended motion with an amended second, and we've got concurrence from the operator as to the amendments. Is there further discussion on the motion? Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you very much. I want to thank the applicant, and we again want to thank the behind the scenes staff work that goes into all this. It doesn't, the staff work on these applications doesn't appear at the hearing level, but it is voluminous, it is appreciated, and it is heartfelt. And we thank our ECMC staff for the great work that they do to get these applications in a space where they can be presented to the commission, and then we can make a determination on the merits. With that, I think we have concluded the business on our agenda. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. We have 2 days of cumulative impacts public input, and we will start at I think it's 10 a.m. Do I have that right? Someone? Mr. Thomas?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Amaro. So 10 a.m. We'll see everybody tomorrow at 10 a.m. for cumulative impacts.